Tuputoa to facilitate the next part of our program, Zaina Jalil. Zaina is an award-winning business and public sector leader focused on deepening New Zealand's engagement with Asia Pacific and improving outcomes for those with diverse cultures, abilities, and experiences. Recognized by Campaign Asia Pacific as part of its 2020 Women to Watch, a group of 40 outstanding women in the Asia Pacific, Zaina has received several international awards for her work promoting New Zealand trade, investment, and education in Asia, and advises businesses looking to grow in the region. Her previous roles include Regional Director of South and Southeast Asia for Education New Zealand Trade Commissioner to Singapore, and Head of North Asia Marketing and Communications for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. Zaina is also a member of the New Zealand Institute of Directors in Global Women. What a woman. Thank you for joining us, Zaina. The floor is all yours. Malo apito.
Kia ora, Florida. Thank you so much for that very generous introduction. E te whānau, kia ora, talofa, nisambula vinaka. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with you all today. My own journey with Tuputoa started about 3 years ago. I came to help Anne with one initiative. And as many of you will know, when you connect with Anne and Tuputoa, one thing becomes two and then four, and then you never leave. In that time, I have had the immense joy of seeing Tuputoa grow in so many ways, you know, its own team, with you all, the partners, interns, and its offer. And that is what we are here to talk about today. Internships as catalysts for change. For those of you who've been on this journey from the start, you will know that Tuputoa started as a facilitator of internships for Māori and Pacific tertiary students. Those internships have been life-changing for our interns and their whānau. And as a result of those internships and partnerships with you, Tuputoa has been able to grow its offer not only for our Māori and Pacific communities, but also for our partners, as Anne mentioned earlier. We will shortly hear from some Tuputoa alumni and partners as to why this kaupapa is so important. But before that, a little bit of housekeeping. We want to make this as interactive and as useful as possible for you, and we encourage questions for our panelists. So please enter your questions in the Q&A function. So that's right next to the chat feature. I'm sure everyone's very familiar with Zoom these days, and I'll endeavor to get through as many of your questions as we can through the session. So let me start by introducing our panelists to you, beginning with our alumni. Wesley Malwafu is a graduate civil engineer with Arup. He hails from Christchurch, but got locked down in Auckland well before COVID-19. Wesley was a Tuputoa intern in the 2018-2019 cohort. He interned with Arup, and that has led to his graduate role, and he's with them now. Our other alumni joining us today is Edmund Carricon. He was raised in Hauraki, and I will let him tell you himself his views on the best iwi in Aotearoa. Edmund was also a 2018-19 intern with Te Ara Pautama, the Department of Corrections. He then joined Meredith Connell as a Crown Prosecutor and is now undertaking a full-time Master of Laws at Waikato University. A very warm welcome to you both. And from our partners, we have Rachel Honey, who is the Internal Communications Manager at Suncorp New Zealand. Rachel grew up largely in small remote communities in New Zealand and on a tiny South Pacific island. Rachel has worked in sales, events, marketing, and external and internal communications roles in LA, London, Sydney, and now Auckland. Anthony Hall is Head of People Experience at Auckland Transport. He grew up in South Auckland and has had over 20 years experience in human resources, working for some of New Zealand's most recognizable companies, such as Spark, TVNZ, and Air New Zealand. Welcome to you all. We are thrilled to have you with us. So first up to our panel, can I ask you, Wesley and then Edmund maybe, to share with us what the Tuputoa internship meant for you?
Yep, whawhtai mo le awanoa, malo le soifua maua, maralangi e mama, tālofo ia outou, uso ma tua whawhine, a whio mai, susu mai, tala mai a au. O lo ingo o Wesley Malwafu, o lo te mā ma tina, e sau mai Samoa. Sa o whanau I Kalais Tete, ma o te nofo, ma whaingaluenga I Aukilangi. E manu e tele le tatou wha moi moi. Yes, hello, I'm Wesley Malwafu, New Zealand born Samoan, born and bred in Christchurch. It was all said before. And yeah, first off, just want to thank Tupatoa for the opportunity to speak on this panel. I love Tupatoa. I love the work they do. And yeah, it's a real honor and privilege to speak. In terms of the internship, what it meant to me, like, it meant everything. I don't necessarily know how much time, well, no, I'll make it quick. But yeah, long story short, I struggled to get an internship. I applied for heaps of places and got denied left, right, and center. Just automatic email given out to me because my grades weren't necessarily the best. But I don't know, like grades were not necessarily a reflection of my true potential. I mean, they are a reflection of something, but yeah, I knew there was a bit more. And then I got in contact with someone from Tupatoa. I got an internship at Arup through them, very short notice, which was amazing. And then my life changed essentially. It's one thing to go to university and study something, but then to go into the workplace and then have this fear potentially that you might have studied the wrong thing. It was a real thing, and I didn't have that. I went to Arup, and I came in with this idea of what the corporate environment was going to be, and that's not much diversity in both gender, ethnic diversity, or just diversity of thought. And I came into this workplace and they were just diverse in every aspect: ethnic diversity, age diversity, gender diversity, which is surprising in an engineering space, I suppose. And there were actually other Samoan and Māori people in there. Yeah, so on top of that, I didn't get to do like medial work. I got to do work that was like specifically like going towards like big projects in New Zealand, which was amazing. I even got to do some work over in like Australia and around, I don't know, the Asia Pacific area as well, but didn't go there, but like worked remotely. And yeah, got to share my story with the office and also just be myself. I have a lot of other thoughts on the internship. It was amazing, but I would be remiss to miss out the fact that alongside this internship, Tupatoa was amazing, like just giving me a ground to just know who I am, instilling a mission in a lot of the interns of, we are going to be the future, and we are paving the way for our future Māori and Pasifika community to come after us, kind of thing. So I'll leave it there. Hopefully there'll be questions later and I can go into a bit more detail, but yes, sorry if I took too long.
Thank you, Wesley. That was beautiful, actually. So, talking about the internship being everything, and sharing your experience. Thank you for that. Edmund, how about you?
Ka timata hau I runga I te mihi ki a rātou kua whakatau mai te whakatau. Kaihea, te pū, te mate kairunga, kairaro, kei te hika hiko, hine nui te pō. Nā mai te manu e te raro ana koe, māui tiki a taranga. Kia rātou kua takahi te ara o te tī waiwaka. Kaua kina tura te whare o hine tī tamaki, hine nui te pō, he mi atu ki maruata reweti te kairuruha o te ata. Aro hoki, te mihi ki a ia, o tene hopa te manu ti o te pai o hine tupari maunga, whakatau mai rā, mihi atu rā. Ko te aroha taia kahumata moi te maunga, ko pia ko te awa, ko Ngāti Hako te iwi. Ai hoki, ko Ngāti Porou, te iwi pai o te motu. Ngāti Porou is the best iwi in the motu. So, yeah, I came to Tupatoa for similar reasons to Wesley. I like to break it down into three things. It was racism, and I think we'll get into that. It was sloppiness on the parts of businesses, and it was also to try something different because I've never been overseas and I sort of don't get around much, so it was good for me to sort of get out of the mighty Waikato and Hauraki down here. So I suppose with racism, it's quite interesting because I wanted to be careful about sharing a story because I'm aware that Minter Ellison is a partner now, I think with Tuputoa. But I can remember when myself and another lady we found ourselves as the only brown people in a room full of about 200 to 300 people at Minter Ellison. And basically when I came to Tuputoa, I wasn't the only brown person in the room anymore. And I didn't have to speak English to everybody. It makes a big difference. And I think a lot of assumptions were being made, like I think they thought her name was Anna, but it was Anna. And my name's obviously Edmund Carricon, and it comes off pretty Pākehā. But, obviously you can look at me and I've got tāmoko, and that's obviously I'm not. And with the sloppiness, it was quite interesting because I've shared this before, but I interned with corrections, but I had tried to inquire if corrections actually had an internship, and nobody knew anything, no matter who I asked. And so I was quite surprised when Tuputoa actually placed me in corrections, because I had been told by managers, people that I knew at corrections, that there is no such thing as an internship at corrections, let alone in national office, which is where I got placed. And I think that was quite interesting, because essentially what happened was a door got opened for me that I was told wasn't there. It clearly was there. I spent the whole summer there, but it was just interesting to see, I suppose, miscommunication within, because it's quite a big, business, correction. So that was quite interesting. And in terms of trying something new, I already knew that I was going to be a lawyer. So when I came to Tuputoa, I'd already signed a graduate contract. And so it was just a matter of trying something else, getting a better view of the justice system, because whether you like it or not, the justice system is a business. You might have issues with that, but it is a business at the end of the day. So I needed to learn about that so that I could inform my future practice. Yeah, that's me. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Edmund. Thank you. Very, very powerful again. And good to hear about your experience and how Tuputoa helped open doors, which, you thought were closed to you before. I'm going to move to Ant. And I know your relationship with, you are with Auckland Transport now, but your relationship with Tuputoa predates that. Can you share with us why you chose to partner and what impact that has had on your organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. Kia ora everyone, talofa lava, kia ora ana, malo elele, bula, g'day. And also big welcome to the new partners as well. You guys are in for a hell of a ride partnering with Tuputoa, so congratulations and good on you. Yeah, dates back to Air New Zealand. Shout out to any of my ex-colleagues who are listening in from Air New Zealand. So yeah, I've had an association with Tuputoa for 5 or 6 years now, and I think it's been great, because I think through that time Tuputoa has grown, not just in terms of the number of partners, but I think, as Anne alluded to before, the service and the role that Tuputoa plays is so much more than when it started out. So being part of that journey has been fantastic. Look, for me, the why is why Tuputoa is I'm a bit of a data guy, and so I just look at the numbers, and we've got Auckland in our title, and I think for many organisations that are based in Auckland but across the country, Auckland's got 26-27% Māori Pacific population. If you look around your room, or your virtual room, or your executive sort of area and your boards, does it look and sound like that? And so that's the and the youth as well, that I think the average age of Māori Pacific in the Auckland region's 23, 24, 25, like around that. It's a young population. So again, it sort of becomes why not as opposed to why for me. And then it's okay not to know what those answers are. So then you can ask for help and you can ask for support. And Tuputoa is the organisation to go to. It's like, who are you going to call? Tuputoa. And the support and access to talent, the challenge to thinking that comes from Tupatoa has just been brilliant for us, for me personally, and for the organisations I've worked in as well. The team, Florida, shout out to Florida, the navigators, just do an amazing job. So yeah, I think it's all of that. Sorry, I've sort of rambled a bit, but it's all of that for me. And actually, Florida's whakatauki you talked to before reminded me of a African proverb actually, and don't ask me to say it in African, but it's actually, I just Googled it before as you were speaking, so I made sure I got it right. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And for me, that's that just sums up the partnership we've had with Tupatoa. I want to go far. I want to make it organisations I work in to make a difference, and I think working with Tupatoa is certainly helping us do with that.
Thank you very much, and lovely proverb there around going further.
I'm not even sure if it is African actually, but I was told it was. So.
We'll take it anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Rachel, Suncorp has been a partner for many years now, and continues to grow its relationship with Tupatoa in terms of your engagement with Tupatoa. Why have you chosen to partner?
Morena and talofa everyone. So our relationship with Tupatoa started in 2018, and it was quite an accident in terms of how we became involved. So one of our team members had heard about it through a friend of hers and thought, wow, this would be great for Suncorp. So she approached our head of people and culture at Suncorp, and it just, as like Catherine Dixon says, it was a gift at the perfect time for us. And they both went along to meet with Anne and the team to find out more about the program. And it was just so compelling in so many ways that it was a no-brainer for us. But I think it wasn't until we had our first interns in that summer of 2018, so we had 3 to begin with, we just felt incredibly lucky right from day one. They added so much value into not only their immediate team, but the wider team as well. So that has just continued to grow each year as well. So our following year, we obviously wanted more. We had 4 interns in our next summer, and then the summer just gone, we've had 7. And this year, we've obviously just become a principal sponsor, and we're looking forward to having 10 interns join us next month. So yeah, well, November. So it's been an incredible journey for us. I think the value they've added has far exceeded any of our expectations. So we were really wanting to do something around our cultural diversity. We want our team at Suncorp and our whānau to reflect the communities that we work in and our customers as well. It just seemed to be the right thing to do. But I don't think we expected just how much we would get and gain from this experience. And I think we all feel that we've actually got so much more out of this than what the interns have. And I know that they're just an inspiring group of people. So yeah, it's been a fantastic journey for us so far.
Thank you, Rachel. And I think that's very reassuring for our new partners to hear that, to know that, they have partnered with an entity which is, as you described, a gift and a gift that keeps giving. Now we've done the sales pitch for Tupatoa, not that it was necessary. We'll get into some of the tougher questions, if you like. So I want to touch on stereotypes and biases, and Wesley and Edmund, you talked about this a little in your intros. So we have with us a Samoan civil engineer and a Maori lawyer, not exactly roles that are often associated with, shall I say it, brown people. So can you two please share your experiences of choosing careers where you are the minority in your fields, and how important your cultural identity has been in terms of your success, both personally and professionally? Wesley, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was thinking on that one a bit. To be honest, I suppose I'll anchor on the comment on like cultural identity, and that for me is probably the biggest driving force. And I'll make a leap in an assumption that that cultural identity and that cultural upbringing with its values and I suppose responsibilities that we've grown up with are something that really anchor us in when we come into the workplace. For me, it's coming into the corporate workplace with with the knowledge that my grandparents migrated to New Zealand, didn't really have a lick of English language, more or less slaved away in factory jobs, like long past the 9-to-5s, and now I have the privilege slash the honor to have gone through education, got into higher education, and have now become an engineer. And I am my parents and my grandparents' like dream, and it's that driving force for me that allows me to go into the workplace and have that drive to be better, to make an impression, to be not just a good Samoan engineer, but be a good engineer overall that has a drive that is like second to none kind of thing. So that cultural identity really like pushes me in that aspect. And I suppose along with the help of Tuputoa, like really carrying your cultural identity and bringing your whole self into work. And I've done that at work, and I feel like at work I'm acknowledged, and the full me is valued, and that my workplace can see that value, not just as from a technical point, but from a personal point. And I might have rambled, but there you go. That's my answer.
Thank you, Wesley. Edmund?
I resonated with a lot of what Wesley said. Like I was actually going to do the same thing, and I will, tacking it on to cultural identity, because yeah, it's just everything, like even when I leave work, that's still me. And I think in terms of going into minority roles though, like for me growing up, it wasn't really like I was aiming to be a lawyer. I think, to be honest, I was just trying to finish high school, because in my region, the biggest problem is people actually just don't finish high school. And so finishing, like my mum didn't finish high school, and just like he talked about a factory job, like to this day, she still takes 15-hour shifts. She busted her ass so that I could get a good education and stuff. And so you don't take it for granted. And so like, even when I finished high school, like in my community, that was a big deal. So going to university was an even bigger deal. And then, when every time I go home, they're always like, oh, there's our lawyer, but it's also kind of quite sad, because I've been to even bigger groupings beyond my iwi, and they still say the same thing. There's our lawyer, because there's not many, like there's Paul Majuri and a few others, but there's bugger all lawyers from Hauraki. So yeah, I'm not so sure what the cause of it is, but yeah, it's sort of, the aspirations are sort of, I suppose, a lot lower, like just getting through high school, I would say. So I think for me, I suppose this whole program made it possible, like for me to step out and try new things. Like it's really weird, because it's just like I assume that maybe, I don't want to go too far, but I assume some people from like past Whangarei and the far north feel the same way. Like I can remember, I don't even think I saw a traffic light until I was 9 years old, because I grew up in the Wops, and like, it's just a different world for those of us who come from rural or like coastal regions. So like university was not even, I didn't think of it until one day I got sat down by a careers advisor in year 13. You think it's funny too, because I'm going to Hamilton High School, and it's just like, not too far. And it never occurred to me, because of the background that I came from. Like the best things, I can still remember the best things were either the police or the army. That seemed to be where people would funnel you. I can always remember someone saying, I can see you reaching your potential as an army officer. And I was like, oh, I don't really know if that's me, but that's what was prized in the community, right? Being in the army. So I think sort of you just hold on to hope. That's what I always try to give my people. you know, like, and you just, like you said, you just think about all the sacrifices that have been made, you know, like it's just crazy when you look back and you see how many people haven't got a proper, like, you know, formal education, I suppose, and how that sort of limited everyone's choices. Because even as a lawyer, when I go to court, I'm always reminded, and this is just me anyway, I'm always reminded that when I look at the docket, the defendant could have very easily been me. It was just a few choices, you know, because drugs are rampant, gangs are easy to fall into, and I was just really lucky I had a mum who looked out for me. So I see myself as lucky, you know, like, because even I had a chat to, like I said, one of those other few Hauraki lawyers, because you can count us on one hand, and he was telling me yesterday too, he said, bro, don't you think we're so lucky, you know, because like, even with like things like, I think we might touch on stuff like racism and over policing and stuff, because I've heard Ant talk about growing up south, and you know, like the reality is, even to this day, I still have bad run-ins with the cops, and you know, it's not great, man. There's so many points where you could go off the rails, and it's like the system is trying to screw you.
Yes, thank
You know?
you. Yeah, and I think that, you know, talking in terms of the system and what you've both shared in terms of sort of, you know, backgrounds and upbringing and what you've come through, and how that actually makes you in so many ways stronger and more resilient and more driven to try and make a difference, because the difference you're making is not just for you, right? It's for your entire communities. So on that note, Rachel and Ant, I mean, do you have thoughts on, you know, when you have these interns coming in with everything that they're bringing with them, what can organizations do to support them and to be places where they can be nourished, where that drive and that determination can be supported, knowing the challenges and the barriers that they've come from?
Yeah, and actually, I just adding to what Wesley and Edmund have said there, I can relate to that as well. So I grew up in Papariki on the Whanganui River, and Omanaya up in the Hokianga. And then we were on a small Pacific island for 3 years as well. And it's that exposure that you don't have to the opportunities out there. So I remember thinking I was going to be a teacher, and my dad was my school principal. Wherever we went, he was my school principal, and my plan was to be a teacher, because that was really the only roles that I knew about, aside from going to the supermarket and just I remember wanting to be on that cash register to punch all those buttons, and couldn't wait to grow up to get a job in the supermarket or drive a truck. So completely understand that you actually need that exposure. When you're in these little remote communities, you don't have that quite the same as what other people do. However, in terms of interns coming into our organisation, I think right from day one, and even prior to that first day, that is so key, that they are actually welcomed into your whānau and feel welcomed. And just thinking about 2018 for us, that was really making sure our buddies and leaders were there for the morning tea. Our CEO was there, and the leadership team were all there to have a morning tea with them. And then I think this is another gain that we've got out of this whole experience, is that come 2019, that welcome was lifted, and we had waiata and whakato and then sharing of kai, and it was another level. And then it's just, again, taken another level last year as well, and really welcomed everyone into the foyer, and we even had a guitar. So we're getting bigger and better, and you don't need to be bigger and better, but it's just the way you actually welcome them in, and even down to things like letting them know that they can take a morning tea break, or you don't need to ask to go to the toilet, or to take a lunch break, like, have you had lunch yet? It's all the little things that really make the difference, and that first day is absolutely key. But I think the other thing too is just don't underestimate them. They are just inspiring on so many levels. So having a role within the team that is adding real value, not just perhaps the admin doing things that are sort of like little jobs. Give them a real role, because they are so capable. Yeah, that would be my advice. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Ant?
Yeah, I'd agree. Tick, all of that. Probably the only other thing I'd add, a couple of other things, is, and we've learned this the hard way, is our interns want to be busy as well. So, and this applies to any intern, I think, but actually, and that goes to trust and responsibility. So, you know, load them up with work. I've had that feedback. I've talked to all of our interns, and it's the one thing they've said is actually we could have been busier. We could have had more. We work over the Christmas period, which is a bit awkward as well, you know, with gaps, and we're encouraging people to have a good break this year for obvious reasons. So I think there's an onus on leaders to put some good plans and thinking around what that means. You know, what does that work look like? What are those outcomes? What are those responsibilities? Be really clear. Yeah, not just sort of give little the more meaning, you know, sort of menial or smaller tasks. Actually, yeah, give the interns some accountability. Yeah, let them, and you'll find we've found when we've done that that the results are amazing. Yeah, I think there is a bit of a tendency to maybe not entrust some of the interns as much because they're thinking, oh, they're new, it's their first job, but you know, all of that sort of stuff. But actually, they just want to be busy and they want to get stuck in.
Thank you. So I'm going to stay with you both, Ed and Rachel, and Wesley and Edmund. You know, feel free to jump in. You know, we're seeing growing emphasis on affirmative action, right? So just today, PwC's announced that they'll be hiring more Māori and Pacific talent, and they're looking at new ways of doing this. And one of the things that often comes up, though, when talking about this is this notion that, you know, people should be recruited on merit and not on some diversity criteria or based on some quota, often kind of implying that the two can't actually go hand in hand. What are your views on that?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I can. I've got a few views on that. So I think a quota is the wrong word. I am a fan of having targets. Again, going back to my point around data, right? You need to use the data and the insights from data to help you inform good decisions. So we've been really overt. We've gone out with very clear numbers for females in leadership roles, and we've said we want to double the number of Māori and Pacific that we're hiring, you know, by the 2023. It's, you know, really clear. It gives you something tangible to every organization loves a good target. So I sort of, I don't know what the argument against targets is, to be quite honest. In terms of sort of the merit-based question, look, yes, absolutely best person for the job, but I think what I've learned over time is the best person applying for the job. And so I think it all comes back to your recruitment. You know, is the job accessible? Is the ad written in the right way? Are you targeting? What are your channels you're using? Are you just, is it actually fair and open? Are you getting the best people applying? And I think for a lot of organizations, they look hard at that. They probably aren't. So yeah, and so then I think you've also got to challenge traditional notions of what merit means, and how much actually, what is merit, and how much value do you place on culture and growth and diversity of thought and you know, all the other things that people bring into organizations, not just grade point averages or you know, those sorts of things. So yeah, to me it's those two things. It's really thinking about what, you know, your hiring practices and your definition of merit, or what good looks like. And I think if you rethink all of those through a very different lens, you will get better outcomes.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, gosh, that's a hard one to follow. We are very much the same. So I know for the last quite a few years now, the focus has been on that gender equality in leadership roles, and we're very close to that 50-50 gender equality on our senior leadership team, which is great. And I know the focus is now turning to more about how is our organisation reflecting the community that we work in and reflecting our customers as well. That diversity of thought is really key for us. So looking at how we measure that going forward, that's another thing. But yeah, it's a journey that we're on. But in terms of hiring by merit, you just think, surely it's a no-brainer, isn't it, really? Yeah, and you just wonder how can we achieve that? That's something we should be doing already. Yeah. and not hiring someone like yourself. Just imagine a team of me, God.
Yes, I think we all want to hire the best person for the job, and as Anne said, but what if those people aren't actually applying for the job? But also, I think when we do that without actually challenging the definition of merit, we run the risk of evaluating the person on outdated criteria or through a narrow lens. And we often make recruitment decisions based on what's worked in the past, when actually our world's changed quite a lot. And as you said, Rachel, and mentioned earlier as well, do our organizations actually reflect the diversity of our communities, of our society at the moment? I want to talk about cultural competency. We're seeing growing awareness of the need for cultural competency. And actually, I was blown away last week by the efforts demonstrated by so many organizations throughout the country in marking Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. So really interested to understand, for all four of you actually, how did your organizations mark this week? And how do you keep that momentum going? Wesley, do you want to share? You were talking about how Arab's actually a very diverse and inclusive organization. How did you mark Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori?
I suppose in the past, when we are in the office, bring in the speaker and they speak about Te Ao Māori, and it's very informative, and we've, I suppose, shifted away from doing these big 1 week or 1 day events, and at the moment there's a shift to trying to do the little things and just chip away in that toolbox, which I much rather prefer. Like when I find that when you try and change someone, be like here's a bunch of words, go learn them kind of thing, it's a bit too drastic. And in my opinion, if it comes to integrating Māoridom into the workplace, it's as small as, if we have a bunch of contracts that are in the Waikato region or in the Tauranga region, then or heck, even in Auckland, then we start saying Waitemata, Tauranga, Taupo, like pronouncing those things first, and just slowly but surely it just increases. And so in our workplace, I think it's every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, there's a new kind of like lesson that's just a small little portion of like a tutoring thing on, here's a webinar thing, these are the names of places, and we've got, who is it, Billy Joe I'm butchering the name because I can't remember it off the top of my head, but yes, and she helps our office and like calls in every now and then to give us these little nuggets every now and then. So that's what I'd say for our office.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share their experience?
I can go. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll share. So I'll share about the Crown, because obviously the uni is very straightforward. The kingitanga owns the land. They'll just hike the prices until they get them to do what they want. So at the Crown, which was quite interesting. So when I first got there, it was a very different Crown. But when I left, there were a few of us who helped to advocate for culture change. So every week now, the Crown has compulsory te reo lessons. They go to an annual noho marae. They get cultural competency training as part of being Crown prosecutors. The next big thing that will be coming through the Crown is having a requirement of cultural competence in order to progress to bigger trials and to obviously get paid more money. So they're looking at making that a requirement. So that's the Solicitor General Una Iagos. So I think it's gotten a lot better. I think I saw last they changed all of their job title names too. So I think, maybe like Wesley's saying, if you sort of just pick one thing and then do a bit at a time, that's going to add up over time. So maybe, it's changing titles, or, starting, compulsory te reo lessons, or, even learning about, it surprises me still how much people don't know about the history of the areas that their buildings are in. We're sort of getting history into schools. I say, let's get history into businesses, because I found it quite interesting. I was always happy to do whai kōrero for pōwhiri and that for the Crown, but the thing that surprised me is they didn't even know who the mana whenua was, where their building was, which was quite surprising. And I like what Ant said about hiring practices and merit. So I'll just comment on that. And so hiring practices are real important because I can still remember my tupu tour interview. And the reason I bring it up was because it's very different. Because if I look away like this, I'm not necessarily being rude just because I won't look you in the eyes. It's a cultural thing. So I think who you also get to do your hiring matters, because, you know, I see it all the time in court as well. People won't look at the judge in the eyes, and, you know, some judges go, you know, look at me when I'm talking to you, but it's just the cultures are clashing. It's really rude to stare someone out in the eyes. And in terms of merit, I always find this quite interesting, because, and it's hard to account for, but I would always go for character. And the reason why is because you might have the smartest person who does the dumbest shit, like take money or wreck your business reputation. You know, look at Russell McVeigh. And the interesting thing about Russell McVeigh is, following what happened there, obviously, because it was sexually inappropriate, law firms are still asking for pictures for when people apply for jobs, even of female applicants. Not sure they understand how that looks, because it kind of looks a bit dodgy and creepy. And the other thing about merit is you have to be careful with what I call shooting star syndrome. And I always remember because I don't know if this has happened for other people, but in high school, they ranked us. So it was like 10P through 10J or something like that. And I was an L, which, you know, they used to call us losers because we're down the bottom. But the real funny thing is, all the kids in the top class, they sort of dropped out of uni, or they, you know, got their law degree but never became lawyers, because they sort of have always had things handed to them. So just because someone's got a great transcript, you know, you got to look at the reality that that's just a moment in time, and it doesn't actually mean very much. Because like I think even, you know, people who got ducks in that, like I want to try and say it respectfully, but they haven't really done very much, you know. So they kind of, like a shooting star, they petered out. So sort of like staying in it for the long game is most important. You want to look for someone who's maybe not got, like, not necessarily, of course you want them to know stuff, but if they haven't got the best grades, you should be more interested in how their work ethic is, you know, because they need to be teachable. Because if they're just smart and think they know everything, you're just going to be annoyed all summer. So
Edmund, with something you talked about, you mentioned earlier, you know, with the teaching bit, but about how you were helping your colleagues understand more, say, about Te Ao Māori, right? And I think what we're seeing with growing cultural awareness is great, but we also, it can be taxing, you know, for the few people of colour in organisations, when you often get asked to lead a pōwhiri or a waiata or do a karakia or explain, you know, cultural nuance to people. So I'm really interested in your experiences of this, Wesley and Edmund. Do you have any advice for organisations who, you know, I'd like to think are generally well-meaning and want to learn and also want to sort of, you know, have the opportunity to give you a platform, but perhaps not fully aware of the burden that places on you?
Yeah, I can share that. I think so. I'm quite comfortable doing it because of the way that I was raised, which is a blessing. Like, I didn't even know that many people didn't grow up at home. So I'm the 23rd generation, and we all still live on the same land from our ancestor who's atop the wharenui. So I, in some senses, I haven't been displaced, which is obviously not the reality for many people. So I think the first thing is sort of, you have to make sure that they're okay with it and that they want to do it. So I don't know how to approach this conversation, but it would have to be some form of, if you can do this and if you want to do this, but it's okay if you tell us no, you know, like some form of that. Could even, you know, it doesn't have to be a conversation you have to have publicly, because it might seem like pressure. But yeah, the other thing I'd say is, if somebody does provide cultural knowledge that you ask for, then I think you should pay them. And I've come to this realization because I gave, in both my internship and in my last role, I gave so much mātauranga away for free. And I came to the realization, actually, the guy who's doing te reo lessons is getting paid. And, you know, it's kind of like, it's not accounted for in my salary. So I think maybe some kind of recognition for cultural knowledge should be given. Yeah, does that make sense? Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, seeing a bit of nodding going on. Wesley, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll agree completely with what Edmund said and just add one small tiny piece. And this comes to cultural competency. So train up essentially. Because, you know, Māori and Pasifika people, a few of us are darker skinned. And I'd just put it out there to get to know what culture the person is, like, or the group. Are they Māori? Are they Samoan? Are they Tongan? Because I've run into situations where it's almost like, do you think I'm Māori? Because it's like, can you do the waiata? Can you do the karakia? And it's all well-meaning. So, you know, the intent is always fine. But yeah, just as a little tack on to everything Edmund said, check if they're Māori first, check if they're Samoan first. And that goes a long way, because then you know if they can speak to it. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think assumptions are very interesting. You know, I myself grew up in Fiji, and very different upbringing to sort of someone from India. But you know, if we ever went to an Indian restaurant, when we order food, I have to tell them mild, child mild, not Indian mild, because otherwise the assumption is, you know, you look Indian, so you must want really, really spicy food. And I can't handle it. So, you know, I think there's one thing about getting to know people better and just understanding what background they come from, but also understanding that even within groups, you know, we are all different and we are all unique. One of the things that I wanted to cover also is, you know, this week, of course, is Mental Health Awareness Week. And related to what we were talking about earlier is the growing angst we are seeing amongst people, you know, and those of us in Auckland have been in lockdown for the longest period in our history. And, you know, we know that our Māori and Pacific communities in particular are disproportionately impacted as a result of COVID-19. So Ant and Rachel, really interested in your thoughts, and maybe Ant, I'll come to you first. You know, what are you seeing in your organization with your teams? And do you have any suggestions of how we can support people through this time?
It's a big question. I'm really proud of the work we're doing with just mental health in general. I like shout out to the team. It's become probably the number one issue for us, and I know a lot of organisations are taking it way more seriously and building really good programs around that. With a whole range of, and I'm happy to talk to you offline of what we're doing. Is probably another session to talk about that. But look, there's no doubt there's this. Actually, my old boss, I'm not sure if he's on, from Westpac, Mark, wrote an article. I read it this morning actually, about the generational impact of COVID on not just like on the economy, but on well-being and people's mental health. It was quite a interesting way to think about it. And then you look at the rise in number of people on the benefit, which I think some new stats have come out at that, yet unemployment is not that high. And you match that with stories of young people leaving school and employment and tertiary education to go and work. I can't help but think that there's something going on, you know, there. We've got this longer term impact on people's. It's a well-being issue, I think, because you know, well-being comes from people's stability, from having a good job, from employment, from having a healthy home and life environment. You know, it's not green smoothies and yoga classes. So I think organisations have to keep taking it really, really seriously and investing in it. I think we've got social responsibility to invest in programs like internships, like partnering with tupatoa, like making sure that we're creating good and sustainable employment opportunities. And then once people join your organisation, what are you doing then? You know, what are you doing about mental health? We've partnered with John Kirwan and Mentor recently, which has been absolutely awesome. You know, in terms of providing tools and techniques and what have you. I think the challenge, which I don't have the answer for, is what are the cultural nuances of that. And I think that's a conversation we are starting to have with our different connect groups within the organisation, our Māori group, Pacifica group, all our diversity, our women's network. We need to talk, I think, about what wellbeing means through a cultural lens a bit more, and nuance your response to that. I don't have the answer to that, but I think that's an important topic as well.
Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, wellbeing has been a key focus of Suncorp for, 18 months. It's been front of mind. So for our people, but for our customers and our communities as well. So I know our CEO sees it as being a responsibility of corporates that can to support the communities that they work in. So 3 weeks ago, we donated 150,000 to communities in South Auckland and Northland to help with food. So the Cause Collective and Fair Food and Salvation Army, but also Shine, our community partner, to help with families who are potentially experiencing domestic violence during these times as well. So it's very broad, very broad. In terms of our customers, there are obviously hardship grants, and our employees, it was all perfect timing, had just undergone customers experiencing vulnerability training in March or February, March last year. So, and they've experienced obviously a higher degree of stress and calls from customers as well. So that's how we've responded to customers. For our people as well, we've got great access to support services like EAP. We've got through our Astron Life brand, all employees have access to the Mental Health Navigator, which is access to specialists for psychology, and everything there is just accessible free of charge for employees. And yeah, in the last 2 weeks, we've all had been told to take 2 hours off during the workday and switch off completely. So and it's ongoing, obviously, this week with Mental Health Awareness Week, and capturing those internal stories from our people that are happy to share about their own experience in terms of mental health. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. Some great suggestions there from you both, and I think, and the point around the cultural context of well-being is a really important one. We are fast running out of time, so time for one last question. Anne talked earlier about how diverse teams are more creative, more innovative, resilient, more productive, and profitable. But diversity without inclusion, as we know, is meaningless. Diversity delivers when people feel valued, when they feel empowered to contribute, when they feel they belong. And so for the last question today, what I'd like to ask each of you to do is, if you can share with us, one tip that you recommend to our participants today that can help in building inclusion and belonging. And maybe, Ant, I'll start with you.
Okay. I've got a little story I was actually reluctant to share, but it goes back to your point, Edmund. Early on in my career, I made that mistake. We just hired a young guy. I'd assumed he was Māori. I asked him to do a bit of a welcome to a new Māori that we'd just employed. And then just as we're sort of kicking off, he said to me, well, you do realise I'm from Cook Island Māori. I don't really know what to do. It was all a bit embarrassing. But that was a massive lesson for me, right? Like, I was early 20s, is to not get to know people. It's just such a no-brainer. Ask the questions, care. I think, show genuine care about getting to know people. Don't make it superficial. It's really important. And then you don't stereotype, which is what I did. You don't stereotype. We've got some. I won't share too much detail, but we've had interns and grads who are living in a garage with 3 kids under 5 with their sister in a house of 15 in Papatotoi. And another intern is living in a mansion in Meadowbank in Auckland here. So and each of them have their own challenges, very different challenges. So don't assume. Get to know people, where they come from, where they're living, what their background is, what their family life is, and you spend an hour and a bit doing that, it will make all the difference. So that would be my one little tip.
Thank you, Ant. Edmund?
Just second what Ant said, like, man, you spoke to me right there. Like, a lot of people don't know there was a point my family and I lived in a garage, like for real, you know, so it's actually probably more common than we realized, and wasn't a lot of room there for parking cars, you know. So sort of park the cars outside. But I think the tip that I would give is do what my team at corrections did. So I come in and they sort of went around, we all did pepeha, everybody. So I found out where everyone was from, and then I went last. And then from there, it didn't stop. So every week, my whole team would go with me to cultural competency training, and we would do te reo lessons. And the best thing, I can't remember his name, but corrections will know who he is. He used to come into national office and he would sit with everyone and go, I think you're about here. So then later on, everyone would also have individual sessions, which was quite special. And I felt like for me, he helped to communicate my experience to them as well, which I found really helpful. You know, like obviously things won't get perfect straight away, but it just showed, like Ant said, that they were genuine, because I knew they were busy people. But, you know, there was this one block of time once a week, and they'd be like, cool, let's go. We've got our cultural competency and we'll sit as a team. We've got this person coming in and, you know, let's have a chat for an hour and learn some stuff. So I thought that was pretty special, you know. Short, like the only other thing is you've just got to think about not just recruitment at our level, but the high levels. Because if I look up, like if I go into an organization, I look up and I go, everybody at the top is Pākehā Pālangi. Says a lot about the culture, and it doesn't give me any confidence that if I stick around, I'll get there. You know, so I need to see somebody there who I can go, oh, okay, they've done it. Maybe I could one day. It's probably the only other, two things. Sorry, two things, but yeah.
That's great, thank you. And very true around, you know, diversity attracts diversity. Rachel.
I think the first thing that comes to my mind is be interested and get involved. So Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori the other week was the biggest week that we've had at Suncorp, and I'm not sure if it's because we're all on lockdown, but it was fantastic for wellbeing as well. So we kicked off the week with our CEO doing his own pepeha. So our CEO is Irish, come Kiwi, and he kicked it off at the beginning of the week, giving his pepeha a go, and it just spiraled through the whole week. So our tikanga group, we've got a bit of a champion in the group, Brian. He pretty much was on a hotline, I think, all week, asking for help for pepeha. So every day during the week, we had a waiata by Brian and his whānau locked in their lounge at home. And the pepehas just being added to our Yammer pages all day, every day was just incredible. And the support behind it as well, I think was contagious is what I'm thinking. Showing that support, encouraging others to do it and being brave to give it a go. And I think just having that real interest in it, and I see that in my kids as well. I've got a strong interest in culture. My father did. My kids just absolutely love kapa haka at their schools and heavily involved and brave enough to lead the haka. And I'm just so proud that that has happened. And I think it must be just seeing how interested people are in culture can extend it far further and create that inclusive culture as well.
Thank you, Rachel. Wesley, you've got the last word.
Cool. Oh, yes. One word, well, and then I'll add on to it. I'm a big fan of empathy. So it ties on to a lot what everyone else has said. You know, getting to know someone else, taking a walk in their life, essentially, like standing in their shoes, essentially, just really getting to know someone. But then as much as I ask the partners to get to know the interns, I'd also like them to reflect on themselves. So to tack onto the empathy is like, don't forget like your why. Your everyone is a lot further in their careers, and something that really helped me in understanding who I want to be as an engineer was seeing the passion and the drive in my seniors, like, and why they enjoy the thing that they do, why they are passionate about engineering or being a lawyer. And that for me is like a big thing, like going into a meeting and seeing that passion from my seniors is massive. So it's something that sometimes, like, anytime you see seniors, they're always just stressed out because they've got some project that they're doing. But making it known to the junior levels of what is your why, what drives you, why do you enjoy what you do, is a big thing, because where that senior is now is where I'm going to be. And if I look up and see, oh man, that guy's miserable, that person's miserable, they're not passionate about what they do, I'm like, oh my gosh, is that my future? So yes, knowing your why, reaching inside yourself and finding, oh yeah, why am I passionate about what I do? And that's what I'd say.
Thank you so much to our panel for sharing your experiences and insights so generously. We greatly appreciate it. And if we were in a room together, we would do a virtual round of applause for our panel at this point, but we're not. So that's all right. We still acknowledge you all and everything that you've done. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but as you all know, diversity and inclusion cannot be a one-off exercise. And this is where Tuputoa can support you in so many ways. As Florida said right at the start, we need all of us to be working together to grow Māori and Pacific leaders for a greater Aotearoa. We need all of us to be working together to build a more productive, inclusive and sustainable Aotearoa. And on that note, I will sign off here and hand back to Anne. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.